In the workplace, there are different communication types that you need to deal with. You may have noticed that some people communicate in what you perceive to be an abrupt way, while others, when they communicate, they beat around the bush and they can't get straight to the point. This is a reflection of different communication styles. No one style is right, no one style is wrong. They're just different ways of communicating that stem from different cultural backgrounds and personalities. In this video, we're going to focus on direct and indirect communication styles so you can better communicate and interact with the people you work with. Let's dig into it. I want to start talking about direct communication. People who use a more direct style of communication say exactly what they are thinking and feeling in that moment. They have no filter that holds them back from communicating freely. The communication is clear and straightforward without any hidden message or implied meaning. They focus on getting the message across in the most efficient way possible. Some may say that direct communication is helpful and valued in the workplace, while others might say that it's too abrupt and it causes friction. The reality is, whether you like or dislike direct communication, it depends on what style of communication you are used to and the style of communication you prefer. We'll talk more about that later on in this video. Let's go through some examples of direct communication. As I go through these examples, I want you to listen to them and think about whether you feel they are acceptable or whether you feel they are too abrupt. Number 1, your direct boss says, "I need you to finish this report by 5 p.m. today, thanks." Number 2, your direct boss says, "Could you reply to client emails within 24 hours?" Number 3, your direct boss says, "I'd appreciate it if you explained why you are suggesting this idea." Write in the comments below whether you feel these examples are acceptable or too abrupt, and what would you say instead? Next, we're going to talk about indirect communication. People who use a more indirect style of communication will hide their true intentions and will find other ways to express what they truly think and feel through facial expressions, through tone of voice, through silence, or other gestures. Unlike direct communicators, indirect communicators expect people to read between the lines, and therefore they're not clear or straightforward when they communicate. And this can cause a lot of confusion, especially if they're talking to a direct communicator who is more upfront and honest with their communication and is expecting them to be upfront and honest as well. The focus for indirect communicators is to avoid conflict or to save face, and they use a variety of indirect communication tactics to do this. Some might say that indirect communication is polite and creates a pleasant and calm work environment because it avoids conflict, while others might say that it's deceitful and dishonest because you never truly know what that person's intentions are. Whether you think that indirect communication is pleasant or dishonest will depend highly on your cultural background and your personality. Let's take some examples of indirect communication. Number 1. The indirect boss is unhappy that Katie is spending so much time using her phone at her desk and scrolling through social media when she should be working. So, the indirect boss chooses to communicate her unhappiness by walking by Katie's desk and glaring at her phone. Number 2, the indirect boss asks Katie, "I was wondering if you would be able to look at social media while you're on your lunch break?" Number 3, indirect boss says to Katie, "There seems to be some mistakes in this report. Would you be able to take another look at it?" These are all examples of indirect communication. Let me know in the comments below whether you think these examples are polite or dishonest, and what would you say instead? The problem with both of these styles of communication is when they are used with somebody who is used to the other style. For example, when an indirect communicator is talking to a direct communicator, they can come across as weak, hesitant, or deceitful because they're not being upfront and honest with their message. Or when a direct communicator is talking to an indirect communicator, they can easily cause offense or come off as rude because they're being too upfront with their message. So when we mix these two communication styles, it can cause a lot of confusion and misunderstanding in the workplace, which then leads to more tension and problems. So we're going to look at how to deal with these two communication styles when you are coming from the other one. How can you deal with direct communicators when you are more indirect yourself? Let's learn how to deal with this through an example. Nathan is an indirect communicator. He grew up in an environment where things were implied rather than directly said. He's not used to people being upfront or straightforward. In fact, it makes him feel uncomfortable because he interprets it as anger or aggression. When Nathan's boss, who is direct, says to Nathan, "I need you to finish that report by 5 p.m. today," Nathan feels he is being abrupt and rude. When Nathan's boss says, "Why haven't you sent that email yet?" Nathan feels his boss is being authoritative and ordering him around. And when Nathan replies with a lengthy response, his boss gets impatient and says, "Nathan, what is the point you're trying to make?" Nathan needs to remember that his boss is a direct communicator, somebody who won't soften their communication because they feel it's unnecessary and too time-consuming. Here are some suggestions and things to remember for Nathan and other people who find direct communication too abrasive. Remember that direct communication isn't always intended to be aggressive. Pause before you respond and consider the other person's intentions. Direct communicators are more focused on the task or the topic being discussed rather than the other person's feelings or emotions. Consider that person's cultural background and personality to know if direct communication is their more natural style of communication. And when you are talking to a direct communicator, try to eliminate unnecessary information, get straight to the point, and talk about your main points only. And get to the point quickly rather than draw out your communication, which makes you ramble. Focus on facts and data rather than feelings and emotions. Ask questions directly instead of beating around the bush. When you understand these things, it will help you better deal with direct communicators and change your workplace interactions so they're more clear, honest, and straightforward. Next, how can you deal with indirect communicators when you are more direct yourself? Let's learn how to do this through another example. Katie is a direct communicator. She grew up in an environment where people said exactly what was on their mind. They gave direct orders. They asked direct questions. Nobody got offended. In Katie's new job, her boss doesn't communicate this way. In fact, she's an indirect communicator. In Katie's mind, her boss never clearly explains what she expects Katie to do. For example, when giving a deadline, her boss would say to her, "I hope you can have this report finished by 5 p.m. today," which makes Katie feel that if she doesn't have it finished by 5 p.m. today, it's no big deal. Sometimes her boss doesn't directly tell Katie when she's done something wrong. Instead, she will communicate it through facial expressions, which leaves Katie confused. Many of the interactions Katie has with her boss leaves her with the feeling that something isn't right, but because nobody has told her directly what she's done wrong, she doesn't know how to fix it. In fact, Katie's boss has said to her that she should be more polite and professional at work, but Katie doesn't really know what she means by this. But Katie really wants a good performance review from her boss, so she's looking for ways she can better deal with her indirect boss. This is what I would recommend her to do. Remember that indirect communicators do not like confrontation, so find ways to soften your message and make it less direct and less abrupt. Indirect communicators prefer to imply their message rather than directly state it, so you will need to get practice in reading between the lines. You should become good at reading nonverbal communication, such as body language and facial expressions, because you can get a lot of information through these cues. Try to soften your direct communication and make it less abrupt by using words like may, might, possibly, perhaps. Include please and thank you in your communication so you come across as polite. Speak slower by pausing and allow the other person to talk. Clear up any ambiguity with softened questions. For example, would you be able to tell me whether you were happy with how I completed this report? Use open-ended questions to allow that person to elaborate. For example, do you have any suggestions on how I can improve? Ease into discussions with small talk. How has your day been? And acknowledge the other person's viewpoint before you disagree with them, using phrases like, I think it's worth noting, or have you considered XYZ? At the end of the day, we all have our own communication style. There is no right or wrong style of communicating, and the intention of the person communicating is really important in helping you decipher what they mean and knowing how to respond. As long as you're not outright abusing someone, direct communication isn't rude. And as long as you are not being sneaky or intentionally hiding information, indirect communication isn't deceitful. It's about understanding how that other person communicates and understanding how you communicate as well, so you can meet them in the middle and have more effective communication in the workplace. There are 2 videos you should watch next or save them to your watch later list: how to be assertive without being aggressive and how to deal with passive-aggressive people. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you got a lot of valuable tips on how to communicate better. If you did like it, hit the like button below and subscribe to my channel for more content like this in the future. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next video.